This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com with a daily wrestling news update. Check out my interview with former WWE superstar Maxine, who was GM of NXT before and was Katrina in Lucha Underground. I did it last night. Very interesting stuff. She says she's not surprised about anything to do with the McMahon and John Laurinaitis controversy and was bullied by people like the Bella twins. But lots of really interesting information in that shoot interview. She seems like a really intelligent person. Smackdown did a 0.49 rating last night. William Regal. At first I found this interesting. William Regal, who was let out of his AEW contract early to go back to WWE. At first I was like, why is he talking about this again? He came out today saying he wanted to reiterate that he did not have an agenda to leave AEW, only to go to WWE and get the job of vice president of global talent development. I'm thinking to myself, why is he talking about this months later? He didn't have an agenda. But again, what news did we get earlier this week? WWE is about to make 50 million plus in cuts. Maybe he's worried his job's going to disappear. He wants to reiterate that he didn't in fact leave to take a WWE office job. That would actually make more sense than just randomly be saying it. And of course, from what I understand, he was released by WWE under the McMahon regime. And there's a lot of people reporting right now that Triple H's creative ideas now need to be approved by Vince McMahon. And Vince McMahon might be fully taking over creative again and sending Triple H back down to NXT. That's what some places are reporting. That's not fact, but definitely Vince McMahon is back involved in creative, and there's new owners of WWE. They're in the process of switching over. So nothing. The only thing that's for sure is anything can happen. There's no guarantees that everything is going to stay the same. And $50 million in budget cuts can definitely mix things up quite a bit. It's interesting that one interesting thing about that interview with Carly Perez, aka Katrina, and Maxine, is she talked about how important it is as a WWE superstar to play the backstage political game if you want to be get a push and so forth. And it does remind me of maybe that's where Triple H's The Game nickname comes from, because he's actually probably the greatest politician of all time. He ended up marrying the boss's daughter. And so anyways, you got to commend him for being a great politician, if nothing else. According to Dave Meltzer, Gable Stevenson, Olympic champion, was supposed to debut after last year's WrestleMania and hasn't been used at all, really, other than for Kurt Angle's Pittsburgh milk celebration thing a while ago. He had surgery to repair heart problems, and apparently he hasn't really blown anyone away yet. Obviously, he's a phenomenal amateur wrestler, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become the next Brock Lesnar, even though he was more successful in amateur wrestling. The thing is, when you hire athletes with no wrestling experience, you really don't know how they're going to do or what their attitudes are going to be like. So far, other than Lesnar from the WWE's program, I'm trying to think, Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns had no wrestling experience, but he was from a wrestling family. There hasn't been all that many major stars that have had no wrestling experience, because Cena came from Rick Bassman's camp where he was wrestling in UPW and stuff, and his dad was a big wrestling fan. Goldberg had no wrestling experience and did really well from the power plant, but the Steve Austins, the Hulk Hogans, the John Cenas, the Rocks all paid their dues for the most part. And also Ric Flair appeared on Joe Rogan's podcast. I haven't seen the full thing. I've seen about 5 clips. I've seen the one clip where he's talking about Xanax addiction, and he started using marijuana to get off of Xanax. He doesn't seem overall from these clips very energetic. He looks very tired in a lot of these clips. One thing I noticed is he's telling some stories in this where he's just like assuming everyone watching. I don't know how much of Joe Rogan he knows about or not, but it seems like some of these stories he's assuming everyone watching would know, like the backstories from being wrestling fans. Where me watching it, I'm trying to watch it as a neutral viewer. Some of the people he's talking about in the stories, your average person wouldn't know. But one of the stories he talks about, which I find weird, that he still holds such a grudge from 1989. He's still complaining about Jim Herd making him get a haircut in 1989. Okay, that's almost 40 years ago. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. Does anyone remember anything bad about Ric Flair in those years in WCW? Did anyone ever even really notice the haircuts and be like, "Oh, I don't like Ric Flair anymore. He's got a mushroom cut," which was popular back then. And he even had it in '92 for a while there, but I just find it weird that he holds these grudges, and like, why even talk about Jim Herd on the Joe Rogan podcast when no one even remembers who Jim Herd is? Like, and the worst parts of Ric Flair's career I remember was not the 1989 time. You guys can tell me in the comments what you think. The really bad parts of Ric Flair I remember, and I'm a huge Ric Flair fan, was when he had that spiked hair in WCW just before it closed. How horrible that looked. That was far worse than the quote unquote Spartacus haircut. That last Nitro match where he's wearing a shirt with Sting. That was depressing to me. The whole TNA run was depressing to me as a Ric Flair fan. The whole Ric Flair comeback match was sad to me. But when I think back to like his time under the Jim Herd regime, like I still think of that as some of the best times of Ric Flair's career. And Sid said it in an interview with me. Sid was making more than Ric Flair, but Sid knew his value and demanded to be paid according to his value, and ended up being overpaid, some would say. But honestly, bash Sid all you want. Sid's had a successful life. He didn't have 5 wives. He didn't have any kids that died from becoming drug addicts. He's a farmer. He moved on from wrestling. I mean, Sid's been pretty successful. But anyway, I just find it weird that he's still holding a grudge over 1989. It's like, move on. You got to move on. Maybe he should see it. There's a documentary on Ric Flair where he talks about seeing a therapist and talking about all the amount that he drinks, and the therapist being kind of shocked by it. But maybe he does need real therapy if he can't let go of 1989 Jim Herd. I don't know. I seriously wish him the best. I am a huge fan of his. He's one of my all-time favorites. His promos and the Ultimate Warrior promos, I know he's also very insecure about the Ultimate Warrior, but those two are my 2 favorite people for promos. With Billy Graham also being up there, but the Road Warriors too. There's so many great promo people. We don't see promos like that anymore. But yeah, I just find it sad that he's complaining about a Spartacus haircut in 1989 in the year 2023, where, if my memory serves me correctly, at WrestleMania 8, he still had that Spartacus haircut under Vince McMahon. Anyways, well, I hope Ric Flair has retired for good, Wallace. I really hope so. Blood Hunter versus Flair. I really don't want to see Ric Flair wrestle again. I actually like him, which is why it bothers me that, like, you got to let go, man. It's just like Bret Hart. These people that we used to idolize, I don't idolize Ric Flair anymore. Okay? It's not cool to cheat on your wives. It's not cool. You end up with kids that don't. You're lucky if your kids turn out all right, and you cause a lot of trauma to your family. He claims he fucked 10,000 women. He's been married 5 times. How faithful was he to these? Like, I can't, like, choose a person like that anymore, that admittedly drank every day of his life, as a role model. Like, that's a bad role model to have. You got to look for good role models. Bret Hart, another one. He claims to be such an upstanding person. He cheated on his wife all the time. He talks about it in his book. I mean, you gotta look for better role models. At least at this point in my life, I'm looking for better role models than those people, because as I said, Bret Hart's so bitter, and Ric Flair just looks tired and burnt out over all these days, and is still having to work in his 70s. And Bret Hart's always sounds miserable despite being a millionaire. I can't really idolize these people anymore. Have I been to Brantford? When they were doing TV tapings there, I was just a baby. Someone says he's at 30 girls. I don't even know what my numbers are. But yeah, I don't get into the numbers too much in my first book. Anyways, guys, I'm gonna look for the full Ric Flair thing. I don't really want to download Spotify for it, but I'm gonna watch the full thing. There are clips up on Joe Rogan's YouTube channel, which he does have a great podcast, by the way. Hart's wrestling was great. I was honestly never a Bret Hart fan. I really never was. I don't doubt that he was a good technical wrestler. But again, I was a Ric Flair fan. I was an Ultimate Warrior fan, Goldberg, Road Warriors, Macho Man, the larger than life characters. Bret Hart wasn't like larger than life to me. But I am a fan of Stampede Wrestling. I did like that promotion and the hard-hitting style. And I am proud that his brothers had a hand in my training. And I'm proud to say that I was trained with, like, Harry Tyson Kid, Natalia, and so many that went on to have great careers. Have a great afternoon or night. It's getting darker later. That's wonderful. 2 weeks from tonight, by the way, before I shut this down, Great North Wrestling returns to Ottawa.
Jack Kilby here, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. No Gimmicks Entertainment is pleased to present Great North Wrestling's huge 15th anniversary show on Saturday, May the 6th at the Earl Armstrong Arena in Ottawa, Ontario. Bell time 7 p.m. This stacked card will feature former TNA Impact World Heavyweight Champion Cowboy James Storm, WCW legend The Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan managing the diabolical Blood Hunter, second generation former TNA star Aces and Eights Wes Briscoe, Canadian champion Black Dynamite Jeremy Prophet, and former GNW Women's Champion Jessica Black, the Conspiracy Horsemen, of Ayatollah Bin Hameen and Greek god Papadon from Vince Russo's brand. Ottawa wrestling legend Bruiser, with much more to be announced. Fans, there will be a meet and greet before the event and at intermission. Tickets, now on sale, available at ticketweb.ca and at the door. Don't you dare miss it.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our